Hello and welcome to this MedTech Innovator Oceania information session. My name is Jeff Malone. I'm the CEO of BioMelbourne Network, and it's my pleasure to be here to open the event today in collaboration with MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continued connections to land, sea, and culture. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be joining us today online. I'm personally joining you from the land of Wurundjeri people in the Kulin Nation. Today's event is an opportunity for startups and scale-ups across the APAC region to learn about the benefits of applying to MedTech Innovator, the world's largest accelerator for devices, diagnostics, and digital health. Throughout the event, you'll be learning about their 2023 accelerator program, which is currently open for application, and you'll also gain insight and tips from MedTech Innovator alumni on the application process and their own experiences as a participating startup company in the 2022 APAC cohort. Following the discussion, we'll open the floor for audience Q&A. We encourage you to submit any questions you have for our speakers throughout the event to the Q&A function. Thank you very much to MedTech Innovator APAC for the opportunity to collaborate on this event today, and thank you to our speakers for sharing their insights about this exciting and very valuable opportunity for startup ecosystem here in Australia to join in. First, we have Frederick Nyberg, Managing Director, Asia Pacific for MedTech Innovator, and we have Greg O'Grady, who is Chief Executive Officer for Allimetry. And it's now my great pleasure to hand over to Fred Nyberg, for facilitation of the discussion. So over to you, Frederick.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you to Jeff and the entire team at BioMelbourne Network for co-hosting this event. Very good afternoon, everyone. Delighted that you could join us today. We will be covering a number of things today for potential applicants to the MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific program. We'll do at least 10-15 minutes of Q&A as well, so we'll be able to answer any questions you may have. So my name is Frederick Nyberg. I'm the Managing Director for the Asia Pacific program based out of Singapore. And I'll take maybe 10 minutes or so and give an overview of MedTech Innovator program, as well as some of our plans for this year. There are a few changes this year, some that we are particularly excited about that I'd like to share in just a moment. We're also thrilled to have MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific alumni company Allimetry here. So I'll be speaking to Dr. Greg O'Grady, who was in the top 4 finalists in 2022. He'll be joining us here in just a few minutes. So let me begin by sharing my screen. And while I do that, I'll just want to encourage everyone to ask any questions either through the chat or put up your hand, and we will get to those either during the course of the presentation or towards the end when we do the Q&A. So again, we're targeting this to Oceania, not just Australia and New Zealand. If we have any applicants from the South Pacific Islands, you are more than welcome to apply, of course, as well. So very briefly, a few words about MedTech Innovator. We are a non-profit organization headquartered in the US, Asia Pacific office in Singapore. We are the world's largest accelerator for medical devices. We cover traditional medical devices, digital health or health tech products, as well as in vitro diagnostics. What makes us different from a lot of other incubators and accelerators is that we're entirely industry-led. So some of the logos that you see at the bottom of this screen are the corporate partners over the last 4 years, as long as we've been running the program in Asia Pacific, the likes of Johnson & Johnson and Olympus, Nipro, Align Technology, Siemens Healthineers, Terumo, Boston Scientific, and so on. We're also partnering with service providers such as Jabil, Oliver Healthcare Packaging, Cambridge Consultants, and we have a regional partnership with APAC Med Trade Association that covers the region. The photograph that you see here, and I'll come back to that a little bit later in the presentation, it was in fact taken on September 26th or 27th, I believe, last year, when we had almost all of our 20 accelerator cohort companies flying into Singapore for the grand finals and the MedTech Innovator Showcase. So here they're all up on stage receiving awards in front of an audience of about 800 people, plus another 500 or so online. So as I mentioned, we are the #1 accelerator in the world in terms of number of alumni companies. We have 509 companies that have graduated through our accelerator program. 79 of those come from Asia Pacific, and the balance are have gone through our US and European program. We have well over 500 reviewers, judges, and corporate mentors that are part of the program. The alumni have more than 200 approved products. In the US, we're now in our 10th year of operation, and we're currently in the 5th year of operation in Asia Pacific. The accelerator is virtual. It's a 4-month accelerator, and we typically accept companies that are a little bit later than many of the nationally linked incubators, but some are at seed stage or pre-Series A up to a Series B or a Series C. We've had companies apply that have raised $20-30 million. For them, obviously, the prize money here of $300,000, which is non-dilutive and of course respectable, is not their main interest. They are typically, these would be companies maybe based out of Korea or based out of China. They may be very successful in their domestic market, but have very little knowledge of how to scale globally. So they would join MedTech Innovator for the global network and the ecosystem, and our ability to provide introductions to investors in other parts of Asia Pacific, as well as in North America and elsewhere. Our 509 alumni companies have gone on to raise more than $6 billion in follow-on equity funding. There have been 32 outright acquisitions. In fact, the last acquisition happened just last week when Zimmer Biomet acquired one of our US alumni companies for close to $300 million. So that happens all the time, whether the markets overall are going up or going down. So overall, a very, very successful batch of alumni companies that have gone through the program. And I'll come to the network and the ecosystem in just a moment. The accelerator, of course, is core to this. There are several elements to the accelerator program. There are 20 companies that will be selected for this in Asia Pacific. We run a tailor-made educational curriculum with a series of webinars with experts. We have office hours. We do workshops. Corporate mentorship is key to this, and we'll get Greg to speak a bit about how that worked for Alimetry in 2022, but typically senior level executives from our corporate partners, whether it's Johnson & Johnson or Olympus or Siemens or any of our other partners, they will take time out to speak with and coach our founders, our CEOs, and their leadership teams on a regular basis throughout the four months of the accelerator. There's obviously a great deal of resources and not direct funding from us, but introductions that typically we can make to the investor community in across Asia Pacific as well as in the US. I mentioned the community earlier, and that's really key here. The not just the community of our corporate partners and the investor community, but also the peer network. And we do encourage our alumni to stay in touch after the event, and they very often do that. And we have multiple events and networking opportunities that bring our alumni together well after the program. I wanted to mention here, and this is important in the blue box here in the lower right-hand corner, that we do not take any equity in the companies that apply. We do not charge a participation fee. We're completely agnostic in terms of geography, so you can apply from anywhere, and you'll see in a moment the geographical diversity of our applicants. So the award money that we give out is entirely non-dilutive. So really there is no downside to apply other than obviously having to spend maybe an hour or so to fill in the online application. So that's obviously something that we encourage you to do. This is the process. Typically, we expect for Asia Pacific to have between 400 and 500 applicants this year. The US program is larger. It's been running longer. They will typically have around 1,500 applicants. As Jeff mentioned earlier, we're currently open for applications right up until the end of this month. And what will then happen is that with our corporate partners and a group of investors, we will review all of the applications and select 50 to 60 of the best companies to invite them to pitch. Throughout the pandemic, these pitch events have been online. As markets are now starting to open up, we will do a bit of a hybrid version this year. So we will have an in-person pitch event in Singapore, and we will do theme-based pitch events online. And we'll have an additional 4 or 5 of those. So they may cover topics like chronic disease management or in vitro diagnostics or digital health or next generation surgical and orthopedics. So we'll finalize those themes and the exact dates of those pitch events in the coming weeks. So that will take place typically between March through to May. In June, we'll do a meeting with our corporate partners to select out of those companies that pitch the 20 best companies that will get selected to join the 2023 accelerator on this slide. So that will this year kick off with an event in San Francisco that I'll come to in just a moment. But suffice it to say, the accelerator is then that 3-4 month program where at the end of the program, we will invite 4 or 5 finalists to compete for a grand prize. And the program typically ends with a showcase in Singapore at the APAC MedTech Forum, which is probably the largest event of its kind here in the region, where typically you will have very senior level executives from all the large multinationals and a number of investors and service providers will give away $175,000 cash, non-dilutive to one winner. And there'll be multiple other awards, such as 12-month residency at J-Labs with J&J, and there'll be other design and development awards as well. These are the companies that were part of our 2022 cohort. And of course, you have a limiter here from Auckland, New Zealand. We'll speak to Greg in just a moment. I wanted to share this, not to go through this in detail, but just to highlight 2 things. One, the diversity in terms of geographical base. We have companies based here in Australia and Korea and India and China, as well as Europe and the US. So companies that have a strategic interest in Asia Pacific and or are based here in the region should apply first and foremost to the Asia Pacific program. And these are the companies here. The companies that are applying and are part of the program from the US and Europe typically are working on either Asia Pacific being their initial target market. Maybe they have a solution tailored to the Chinese population, or they're working on Asian prevalent diseases, and they will then typically apply to the Asia Pacific program as well. I also wanted to flag the diversity here in terms of technologies and innovations. So they range from precision oncology solutions to endoscopy and robotics, and as well as digital therapeutics. We had one company apply that just had a mobile app. So you do not necessarily have to have a traditional medical device technology. We accept a number of different solutions and platforms. Quick reminder that we do have 3 programs globally. And of course, in the center here, you see the MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific program and the cohort up on stage in Singapore. We do run a US and European program. And for companies that are based here in the region, you're actually welcome to apply to any of these programs. Typically, if you apply to multiple programs, we will then decide if you go forward, which program is the best fit for you, because you cannot, typically you will not get invited to pitch for 2 programs at the same time. Either you make that decision on your own, or we will make that decision for you. The downside of applying for the US program, as I think I hinted to earlier, is there is far more competition. We expect at least 1,500 applicants in the US program, whereas the number of applicants in Asia Pacific, given that we've been running this for a much shorter period of time, is expected to be in the 400 to 500 range. BioTools is a new program in the US. We have not yet launched this in Asia Pacific, and this is focused on life science tools, working with corporates such as Illumina, Thermo Fisher, and others. These are the dates for 2023, so we're now open for applicants. We'll have the reviews, as I mentioned, through January and February. The 50 to 60 startups will get invited to present either online or at the in-person event in Singapore, March through to May. I wanted to come back to the addition for this year, and this is quite new. Every year, those of you who may be familiar with the MedTech Innovator program in the US, you may be aware that we run a MedTech Innovator Summit conference in San Francisco, in collaboration with the Wilson Sonsini Medical Device Conference, middle of June. Now, up until now, that's been exclusively focused on our US cohort, but as of 2023, we will invite our Asia Pacific accelerator cohort. So the 20 companies that get selected to be part of the Asia Pacific MedTech Innovator cohort will get invited to join the MedTech Innovator Summit in San Francisco, middle of June. There'll be 2 dedicated days with workshops, networking opportunities, and an opportunity, of course, to network with your peers in the US and European program. We will also selectively invite alumni. So Greg Alimetry is more than welcome to join us for this as well, and I'll reach out to you separately about that. So that is entirely new for this program, and we did get the feedback from our participants in the APAC program that they were asking if there were better ways that we could leverage the immense ecosystem and network that we've developed over 10 years in North America, and this is one way for us to do that. So we're very excited about that, and that will effectively kick off the 3-4 month accelerator, and it will then wrap up in Singapore on the 26th of September when we do a showcase. All 20 companies will have an opportunity to present in front of an audience of senior corporate executives as well as investors. And then, of course, we'll have the grand finals where we'll have 4 to 5 finalists presenting in front of a live audience of 800 to 1,000 people. The winner gets selected in real time by the audience. There will be judges on stage, but it's an audience vote that determines the winner. I'm not going to go through the detail of how we go through the evaluation, but suffice it to say that we have a fairly sophisticated online platform that our judges and our corporate partners use to evaluate your application. We look at your application from a point of view of value, execution, and momentum. We examine your value proposition, your IP, your competitive advantage. We look at your ability to execute. We look at your team. We look at your ability to meet milestones and look at the momentum that you might have. So these are the metrics, and I believe they're available on our website if you want to refer back to these. And just finally, some photos from our past events. These are pitch events that we've done in the past, both virtual and in person, during our roadshow. Some of these were done in the last couple of years, and some of the in-person events were done earlier. These are some of the photos from our 2022 MedTech Innovator Summit in San Francisco. And as I mentioned, that will now be open to our APAC accelerator cohort as well. Part of the accelerator, we do the educational webinars, and this is just to give you a flavor of some of the types of topics that we cover. We usually do a survey at the beginning of that process so that we are able to tailor the program specifically to that cohort of participating startups. But this can cover topics from health economics and reimbursement, regulatory, manufacturing, outsourcing, how to raise capital, not just in Asia Pacific, but in the US, commercialization, attracting talent. And typically we have a panel of experts, as well as alumni companies. Of course, as an accelerator company, you'll have the opportunity to interact directly with all of these speakers. And finally, some additional photos here from our MedTech Innovator Grand Finals in Singapore. So live on stage here, we have the judges in the upper left-hand corner from Johnson & Johnson, Align Technology, Becton Dickinson, and Siemens Healthineers. And again, very senior level executives. Dr. Joseph Smith, for example, is Becton Dickinson's Global Chief Medical Officer. So very senior level participation from our corporates. I did want to mention as well a new initiative for 2023. We have a separate standalone innovation program that we run with Olympus. The Olympus Innovation Program, you can participate in the Olympus program in addition to participating in the MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific program. So they are looking for companies in some of these areas that you see here on the screen, technologies focused on cancers and diseases of the stomach, colon, lungs, and within the urology space, not just endoscopy, but also robotics and other transformative technologies that affect the patient pathway, novel devices that may replace current procedures, ethical AI, next-gen automated documentation technologies, and so on. There is more information on this on our website. What you need to do if you are applying is simply, as you go through the MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific application online, you'll come to a point where you have the opportunity to simply click a box that you are interested to be considered for the Olympus Innovation Program as well. Just click that box. If you think that you have something to offer in these particular clinical areas, I'd certainly encourage you to apply. In addition, of course, if you're an alumni company, you've already been part of MedTech Innovator in the past and have an interest to now apply solely for the Olympus Innovation Program, you're more than welcome to do that. And again, you have to go through the Asia Pacific application process. And again, you just simply click the radio button online to indicate that this is something of interest. We'll come back to the contact details at the end of this event as well. Here's the QR code. If you have any questions that we haven't answered through this webinar, do contact us on this email. I've done enough talking for now. I'd really like to introduce our my fellow speaker here and panelist, Dr. Greg O'Grady, who's the founder, the chief executive of Alimetry, based out of Auckland, New Zealand. Greg was part of our program in 2022 and in our among our top four finalists, and up on that main stage in Singapore in end of September. Welcome, Greg. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll start by maybe asking you to just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Alimetry.
Thanks, Frederick. It's great to be here. Yeah, so Alimetry is a medtech and digital health company here in New Zealand. We're 3 years old, or 3.5 now, and we build wearable medical devices to diagnose gastrointestinal diseases. So these diseases are really common, things like indigestion, nausea, and vomiting. The diagnosis is currently really poor, often invasive, and we offer a wearable and an app-based solution so that we can get a clear diagnosis that doctors use a cloud-based reporting technology to diagnose and treat with.
Excellent, very, very helpful, Greg. So we'll go through the process maybe for the benefit of the audience here. And of course, you went through the online application. I don't know if you did that or you had someone in your team do that maybe for you, but you were then invited in to pitch. And we ran the pitch events, I believe, last year similar timeframe to this year, around March through to May. So maybe before we go into discussing the accelerator and the finals, tell us a little bit about your experience pitching, and that was of course done entirely online. Were you able to get some useful feedback? Did you have how did that work for you? Was that an entirely new experience pitching online, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was all pretty smooth and quite fun, actually. So the application form itself was not burdensome. There's just a little list of questions, and some of our team put that together, and I checked it. And then the pitch sessions, yeah, they were enjoyable. They're done as a number of small groups, and the judges are really high quality, we found. There's a range of judges. Some are investors, some maybe technical experts or from industry, and I found their questions often very perceptive. And so we would just do a quick pitch of about 5 minutes, and then we would do small groups of questions and then rotate around. And yeah, it was a good opportunity to get a range of views on what we were doing in a very quick format. And that's, I think, what I enjoyed about it most.
Great. And what we do try to, what we do with our judges throughout the online pitch roadshow for the 50 or 60 companies that pitch is to collect their feedback and anonymously provide it back to our pitching companies. So I don't know if you received a follow-up email. You should have after the pitch event with some anonymized feedback directly to you from the judges. Did you get some of that? I don't know if you recall, Greg.
We did, and that was pretty interesting because you might talk to an investor, but often you won't get a kind of candid anonymous reply back, and it's all kind of listed out. So yeah, really interesting to see a divergent range of views about what you were doing in some areas of concern, other real enthusiasm, and kind of get that sort of feedback is really valuable.
Great. So then, of course, we had our selection committee call, and we selected the 20 best companies, and of course, Elemetry were part of that group. I think it was in June sometime. We went out with a press release globally with the names of all of our companies. We disclosed that, and then, of course, in the accelerator, we had the webinars. And we also had the corporate mentorship. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with the corporate mentorship, Elemetry had no less than 3 companies mentoring you, which is a great sign. It doesn't happen very often. Companies can have a single mentor. They can have 2 mentors. Occasionally, they will have 3 mentors from 3 different organizations. And that's usually when they're particularly enthusiastic about a technology or solution. So maybe tell us a little bit about the accelerator experience, how the webinars worked out, some type of topics, and how the mentorship process worked.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the mentorship. So the way I think it works, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they select you. And so there's a pool of companies, a pool of mentors. And so they choose companies they like and advocate for. And for us, there were a really good range. There were 3. There was J&J, so we've got a really good corporate perspective. There was Jabil, who are manufacturing and supply chain and huge international company in the manufacturing space. And then we had Cambridge Consultants as well, who were really, they're data-driven. They do a whole range of things, but we were very interested in their AI perspective. And so we were able to get kind of voice of a market in Asia from J&J and a really strategic view. And then we were able to get looking at supply chains and some of the difficulties we were having in that difficult supply chain period for a while there last year, and talking about diversifying our manufacturing from Jabil. And then from Cambridge, we were able to go into a completely different area in AI. And so they were experts for sure, and they were able to give really targeted and specific advice, and they took a deep interest. So I think that phase was certainly very valuable. The webinars were great. So this is a kind of a weekly thing, and I didn't attend all of them. I attended quite a lot of them, and then some of our team would come to other ones they were interested in as well. And I thought that was great. The webinars are pitched across a range of levels of expertise. So they definitely pitch at quite a general level. So even if you're an early stage company, they cover a lot of the basics and regulatory and reimbursement and IP and so on. And so some of our team members got good perspectives across that as well. And what we found good, Frederick, was, often down here in New Zealand, Australia, we get very focused on our local market, the US and UK and Europe. But being part of the Asia Pacific, the draw card for us was to really understand APAC market a bit more, because it's something that I wasn't familiar with at all, really. And so I used those webinars as trying to get a perspective across APAC about what was happening with market entry and reimbursements and the providers over there and so on. And that was the key thing that attracted me to this program with APAC, and that I probably got out of the webinar session.
Great, thanks for that feedback, Greg. And for the audience here, the webinars actually are in the public domain, so you can go to the MedTech Innovator YouTube channel and you can actually look at these, go back and look at these webinars. You're more than welcome to do that. We do have, what we do not make public are the Q&A sessions between our accelerator companies and the panelists, but you're able to go back and look at webinars both from our US program as well as from our Asia Pacific program if there are any of interest. Great. So then of course we were fortunate to have the APAC MedTech Forum take place in person in Singapore for the first time in 2-3 years. So that was, I think, something that we all looked forward to, being able to interact in person after the pandemic. They had been running that conference online for the last 2 years. So we invited all of our 20 accelerator companies to fly into Singapore. We had a showcase, and then of course the grand finals. And I believe out of the 20 companies, there was only one company, there were 2 companies that were not able to make it. So we had at least 18 companies there. And I believe there was also the possibility, for entirely optional, for the participating startups to exhibit. There was a startup zone as part of the MedTech Forum conference. So Greg, maybe tell us a little bit about that experience and networking opportunities there. You had to do you presented twice, of course, on the showcase stage and then in front of the main audience on the main plenary stage. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was probably my favorite part of the program, easily, I'd say. And the opportunity again was to explore what's happening in APAC, which was something I felt quite disconnected from, trying to understand more deeply. So I went into that forum with a really open mind. The network opportunities were great. There were kind of 3 main groups. There's the other innovators, and it's just interesting to talk to other founders and people that are deeply immersed in the space. So you can bounce a lot of problems or opportunities off. Then, of course, there's the investors, and there were a good range there at the showcase day. They have an investor sort of session where you can pitch, and I came away with a handful of business cards after that were pretty interesting. And then with the strategics and the corporates as well, which is not a group I interact with very much. So it was good, especially that, to get a kind of voice of what they're interested in at the moment, what sort of areas they're looking at, how they see healthcare evolving. So a lot of really interesting conversations with people from big pharma and big device who I was able to spend some quality time with at some functions and really get a deep insight into the way they were thinking. Yeah, and then the forum itself was excellent. The focus last year was on remote care, which was ideal for us because it's such an interesting area, and that's where the puck is going. So we were super interested in that, and I came away with a lot of ideas that have genuinely helped to shape what our strategy will be this year. So I got a lot out of it, Frederick, especially the forum for me was the best part of the program.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, in terms of networking, there were multiple networking opportunities, and I believe you were there when we had the social night on the first evening with essentially the entire board of APAC Med was there, and it was interesting just to give the audience here a flavor of the level of seniority of the participants there from the corporates, and everyone's very relaxed, and it's a very sort of informal atmosphere there. So we had all of our 20 or 18 MedTech Innovator Accelerator companies there, and I was standing there with a glass of wine having a conversation with a startup from Korea, together with the Asia Pacific president of Roche Diagnostics, the president of Siemens Healthineers for Asia Pacific, and the Asia Pacific head of Terumo, just casually having a conversation about opportunities in medtech. So an opportunity to meet senior executives all together at once in that sort of a setting, I think is fairly unique. So I think that the feedback I've been getting from some of our other alumni and accelerator companies, but that was something that blew them away. The level of networking that they were able to do with senior level executives, and hopefully you had the opportunity to have some of those conversations as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think I spent an hour with one of the 3 people you mentioned at that
okay.
forum. That's really going deep on what their strategy was and what.
Yeah.
Very interested in where they saw the healthcare landscape evolving, and that was a highlight conversation. And I kept a new contact from that, so it was great.
Excellent. So to what extent have you been able to keep in touch with either with your mentors or your peers or people that you met at the conference? Are you able to keep those contacts alive and have follow-up conversations with?
Yeah, I got to know enough of them that I feel on good terms and can reach out pretty easily.
Good.
And that's across a range of things. So, as I said, the network kind of more corporate investor type of things. I've got business cards and had some follow-up conversations. And then in the cohort as well of the other startups, I've kept in touch with 1 or 2 of them as well, just bouncing ideas about clinical trials and this sort of things, where they, to enable access to trial populations. So yeah, that's been great. And it is a good community. Great people. I always like meeting other founders and people have a big vision to try and change the world, and I don't know, it's just an easy, fun place to be in.
Yeah. And what we try to do as well, we have a Slack channel for our cohort companies, and we keep that open so any cohort company or any alumni can go back to that and reach out directly to their peers and ask questions and tips, whether it's about looking for a CRO in China or looking for some other resource that they may already be familiar with. Excellent. So final question, maybe Greg, before we move on to Q&A here. Any tips, advice that you might have to startups now in Australia and New Zealand or anywhere else here in the region that are maybe sitting on the fence thinking about whether to apply or not?
Yeah, it's competitive, and the sort of interest that the judges have is similar to what an investor would have, and having your basic building blocks in place and being able to tell your story really fluidly is really important to differentiate yourself, show your uniqueness and the quality that your company will have. I think, having validation is really important. So you're kind of judged against so many other companies that if you can show your validation clinically, you can show that you've thought about your regulatory and reimbursement strategies in a really meaningful way, then these things will shine through when you do your presentations as well. So I think it's just about doing the basics right, telling your story and being really well prepared. The pitches, they really like pitches in this competition. It's a bit of an art form that they seem to really focus on. So delivering a polished pitch is important as part of this program as well.
Great, thanks for that. We do, in fact, work with our 20 cohort companies to also produce a 1-minute video. It's not a pitch video, but it's separate from the from all the pitching that is done, but a 1-minute introductory video. And that's something that you don't have to do before you apply. It's done during the program. We have one obviously from Alimetry as well. And again, for those of you attending, these are in the public domain. So again, you can go to the MedTech Innovator YouTube channel and watch the past 1-minute videos from all of our past cohort companies. It will give you a flavor of where they are, the stage of development, the types of technologies, and the types of companies that are applying. But don't get fooled that you think they have extremely polished videos and therefore they are far more advanced than you are. The reality is that most companies, and I won't speak here for Greg, because I don't know exactly how you put together your video, but the reality is that the vast majority of participating companies spend only a few $100s putting together that video, and that's something that we provide some advice and training on throughout the accelerator program. But that's a useful resource if you want to look at some of the past applicants. Good. With that, I will turn to the audience for questions. You may either put up your hand, and I'll give you the opportunity to speak, or you can type in your question in the using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So please go ahead and ask questions. We have one from Santosh. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Frederick and Greg. Very, very informative session. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
I've been really excited and I've been looking forward to it. My question is, you've almost covered a lot around tips on how to kind of stand out, Greg. But when you're going through for example, Frederick, if you are going through the applications, what is it that jumps out at you? And is there something in particular, catches your eye when you're going through the applications that actually stands out and that can make you stand out from the other companies? Thank you.
Great question. So again, I'd go back to the metrics that I shared earlier and look at some of those. But I would also bear in mind, think about who our corporate partners are, because as Greg mentioned earlier, ultimately, they not only select who they want to mentor, but they will ultimately select who gets into the accelerator. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be an immediate fit for J&J to acquire. But if you broadly fit within the areas of perhaps strategic and clinical interest of some of our corporate partners, and those areas are very broad. So Align Technology is in orthodontics, but they're interested in anything that relates to maxillofacial surgery or anything that relates to AI in healthcare. So these areas are very broad. But if you put yourself in the shoes of some of our corporate partners, what would they like to know for them to advance you through the program? So if you focus on some of those areas, that's always helpful. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to fill in every single field in the application form. If you don't have regulatory approval in the US, most companies applying to the APAC program don't. So that's absolutely fine. Be honest and truthful. But I would also encourage you to, if you have the opportunity to compile some non-confidential documentation, you have the ability to upload that. So if you have done past videos, you can upload those. If you have past pitch decks, you can upload those. If you have instructions for use or a published study, those types of pieces of data are useful, and we encourage you to upload those. So the more information that's there, that's always better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Looking forward to your application. Any other questions? Do we have anyone else? Again, either use the let's see, we have either use the Q&A function here at the bottom of your screen, or just raise your hand. Santosh, another question from you?
I'm happy to leverage the time if no one else has got.
Absolutely, more than welcome to.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm very, very optimistic and putting a best foot forward. However, if you don't get into the cohort, what is the other kind of opportunities to be involved in the network more and leverage those mentorship opportunities? Are there any other avenues available? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So certainly just being invited to pitch is always helpful. As Greg mentioned, and as I highlighted as well, the judges' deliberation that we run after each pitch event, we have a good hour of conversation after 10 companies have pitched. We have a good hour of conversation with the judges, and to compile their feedback. It's both qualitative and quantitative. We share some of that anonymously back with the companies. So even if you're not in the final 20, but you get invited to pitch, you will get feedback from the judges. That's both during the actual pitching during the online sessions, as well as after the event. You will always have the opportunity to apply again. The fact that you don't get selected to the accelerator one year doesn't mean you will not get accepted the following year. Companies evolve and they hit new milestones. We have new sponsors and corporate partners that have new areas of interest. Companies that perhaps did not get selected one year are more than welcome to reapply. I'll turn to Greg as well if you have any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, no, enough to add. I think reapplying if you don't get on, and yeah, keeping an eye out. That, like Frederick said, a lot of the sessions are on YouTube as well and that sort of thing, so you can catch up with some of the webinars.
Sure, thank
Good.
you. Try to
Thanks.
come to you, Greg, later on, just to touch a little bit more base and prep a little bit better, if that's okay. Via
yeah.
link. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Santosh. We have a couple of questions here as well in the from the chat. So Stephen is asking, the time is quick, 4 months. Was this okay in practice? And what preparation is required, if any, before application? So before you apply to the program, the application, as we've said, is currently open until the end of January. There is no particular preparation that's needed before you apply. In fact, there is, as you go through the program and you do get selected to the accelerator, there is no particular preparation that's done for the 20 companies that go into the accelerator. What we do at the beginning of the accelerator, though, is we, either myself or our CEO, Paul Grand, will do one-on-one calls with each of the 20 companies to understand your goals and objectives of the accelerator, how we can best help you, how we can best leverage the resources from within the MedTech innovator ecosystem, so that you get the best possible experience out of this. So yes, 4 months is a relatively short period of time, but the interaction with the mentors is something that you can you can leverage that as much or as little as you want. So it's good to come prepared to the mentor conversations and the mentor calls. In some cases, the mentors may want to have a discussion with you for an hour every couple of weeks or every week even. For other mentors, they may just have one call every 3 or 4 weeks. But as you go into those calls with your mentors, do come prepared. I think you get as much out of this as you put in. So if you're prepared going into the mentor conversations, you will get much more out of them. Again, I'll turn to Greg, and you've had 3 mentors, so you've been through that process. Any thoughts on that from your side?
Yeah, nothing to add. Someone did ask here, which I think is a great question. What's the time commitment required? Relevant to your point there. Yeah, it's not onerous, and the way we kind of managed it was with the webinars in particular, the 1 hour weeks, we shuffled them around a bit, and we had the team take part in different activities so that we kind of spread both the learning and the time commitment across the team. There's a little bit of time spent brushing up pitches, and there's time spent polishing them and practicing them. And also there's time spent talking to the consultants and things. I found all that was valuable time, because we were kind of between funding rounds anyway, and the opportunity to kind of rev up your pitch deck is never a bad thing. And so, you know, I didn't view it as time lost so much as things that we probably needed to do anyway. And then the forum was unexpectedly good. Like, I thought, oh, that's a commitment of a few days and maybe I should, you know, avoid it. But when I went there, I thought this was actually something that I got a lot of yield out of, and the time was well spent. So overall, it was time well spent, so long as you manage that appropriately with your team and so on, I guess.
Thanks, Greg. We have a couple of more questions here. Question from Gabriel about the Olympus Innovation Program. He asked, is there a particular interest for said for the Olympus program, there is a particular interest for oncology. That's one of many. We're in the digital health space, but not related to oncology. Should we stick to the MedTech Asia program only? So Olympus is not solely focused on oncology. They're focused on other areas as well. If you're in the digital health space, but not focused on oncology, their main focus is gastroenterology and GI, and we have companies that may be focused on AI solutions to analyze images taken during endoscopy. Those sorts of solutions would certainly be welcome to apply as well. So there's no real downside applying to the Olympus program. So if you're in doubt, I would encourage you simply to click that box to be considered for the Olympus program as well. Worst case, you do not get selected to pitch to the Olympus executives, but you will still be considered for the Asia Pacific program. We have a question for Greg from Andrew. How did you find they tested your idea? Did ever you have any doubts during the 4 months? What did you do to work through that?
Yeah, I mean, they look at it from every angle, just like I'm sure you're looking at your startup, tested you quite robustly. The judging certainly tested you from every angle: regulatory strategy, reimbursement, wanting to know the clinical market fit. Have you got that clinical use case nailed? Was a really important one that people robustly looked at. So that's something that often investors will kind of maybe not be that familiar with, but the strategics and the judges, like the Olympuses of this world, they will be laser focused on your clinical utility use cases and the product market fit that you're achieving. So that was robustly tested. And then they look at the team. Frederick put up that kind of matrix of judging things, and they're all kind of text box exercises anyway that your startup should be achieving. And as well as that, wanting to see momentum on them, so the execution milestones are kind of being reached. And that's what they say they're looking for, and that's exactly what we found they were looking for. So that's what came out in the Q&As and the judging and so on. Did we have any doubts? The people who decide at the end of the day about these things are the judges, the corporates, and they might have unique spins of things they're interested in or exciting areas and their own biases and things. But at no time did we lose confidence. It was just a matter of understanding other people's perspectives and whether we fitted in with their worldview or not at times. But yeah, overall, it was pretty smooth.
Thanks, Greg. That's really valuable advice. And I wanted to just add to that it's not mandatory that you have all the answers when you pitch. There are earlier stage companies that may not. There are earlier stage companies that may not necessarily have their clinical validation done or have the answers to all the reimbursement questions. But if at least you show during the pitch that you understand that this is something that will be required of you. If it is part of your plan over the next 2 to 3 years, that you know that this is something you need to spend time and money on. Maybe you're raising money so that you're able to do that. If you completely overlook it, and the same goes for example, a competitor analysis, there are still a number of companies that completely overlook a competitor analysis or simply say, we have no competitors. Don't say you have no competitors. The investors, especially the VCs, will come down on you like a ton of bricks that you haven't done your research well enough. Think about generic competitors. Think out of the box when it comes to competition. So there are some things that are useful to have in that pitch, but you certainly do not need to have all the answers. Conscious of time, I don't think we have any more open questions. If there are any more questions, feel free to channel those through the chat or raise a hand. I believe we had some links provided here to past videos. we had the question about time commitment that was answered. Let's see. Question here from Jeff: is there any further detail about the BioTools Innovator and how does it differ? So good questions. The BioTools program, it was launched in 2021 in the US. It is open for companies based globally, but you need to just bear in mind that the two key sponsoring organizations of the current BioTools program, where we're looking essentially at life science tools and those and related innovations, that they are US-based VCs or US-based investors, and therefore it is far more likely that they will choose a company and a technology that's based in North America. Which is why we're now looking at the possibility of bringing the BioTools Innovator program to Asia Pacific. There's certainly a great deal of interest from the Singapore ecosystem. There is an interest from some of the BioTools type corporates, like I mentioned, Thermo Fisher and Illumina and Danaher, maybe, and others. So we will probably bring it to Asia Pacific. We have not decided whether that's going to happen in 2024 or possibly 2025. We do need to have the resources and funding for that. It is a separate standalone program with a separate application program, a separate set of judges and corporate mentors and so on. And we need to make sure, maybe most importantly, that we have critical mass in terms of companies that can apply to that program. So for now, if there are anyone on this call that are working in the area of life science tools or BioTools type products, please go ahead and apply to the MedTech Innovator APAC program. We are currently bundling those types of solutions and technologies together with our in vitro diagnostics online pitch event, and we've had companies in microfluidics and other areas apply in the past, and we'll be able to channel you to the right contact. So that's what I would encourage for the moment. Right. Any other questions from anyone else? We are almost at the end of the hour. If there are no more questions, I'll hand back to Jeff. Let me just first of all thank all of you for joining this afternoon. Great to have so many participants. Do bear in mind the deadline is the 31st of January. I will just as a last reminder share the QR code as well as the email address at the bottom of the screen. So this does not go to an automated bot. You will get an answer from a person. If you have any questions related to your application, this is where you can find, this is the way to find more information about that. A big thank you to Greg for joining us. Delighted to have you rejoin us. We'll certainly keep in touch, and I'll get back to you separately about San Francisco. We'd love to have you to see you at the San Francisco conference in June. So thank you so much, Greg, for joining us. And with that, I'll hand back to Jeff.
Thank you, Fred and Frederick, and also thank you, Greg, for sharing all those insights and tips on the accelerator program. It's having been involved, Frederick, from the time this all really was initiated 4 years ago and till now, to see the evolution and change and the development and the sophistication and the number and quantity of people coming through and quality of people coming through the program has been fascinating to watch the evolution, and it sounds like that evolution continues. So that's great to see. And as mentioned, as Frederick mentioned, applications for the 2023 cohort are now open and will close on January 31st. Please jump on the MedTech Innovator website to find out more. Of course, if you have any more burning questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or a member of BioMelbourne Network team. We can also help connect you to the MedTech Innovator team to progress your startup journey. And with that, it concludes our session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.